Hello, brains. Let's talk about hyperfocus. This episode is sponsored by Babble, which I'm using to learn Dutch. I feel really good about where my Italian is in terms of being ready to travel, and Babble has been so helpful with improving my ability to speak a language I'd already kind of learned. I was curious how it would go if I used it to learn a completely new language from scratch. One of our moderators is from the Netherlands, and I know a lot of brains who watch this channel are too. They've tried teaching me a few words in Dutch before, but I found it a lot harder to learn.
Goedemorgen.
Goedemorgen. Nope. Goedemorgen, Wouter. Wouter? Hoe gaat het? There are sounds involved that my mouth does not know how to make. I have no idea what I just said. I'm curious to see if Babble can help. I just started, but I was surprised how easily I retained what I learned when I really have never spoken this language before. Zij. Jij. I'm amazed at how fast I'm picking this up. We jumped into conversational examples right away.
Goed. En met jou?
Ook goed, maar ik moet mijn trein halen.
It's got like a conversation going, and you only have to choose one word. I'm hoping my pronunciation improves. The app does give me a lot of practice with that. Oh, when leaving, the A in dag often sounds a bit longer. Dag.
Dag.
Dag. I didn't know that. One of the things I love about Babble is that you almost don't notice how much you're reviewing words you've already learned, because even while it's reinforcing words you know, it's already introducing you to new ones. You'll often see the same word, but in a completely different conversation. Even when you've completed a lesson and go back to intentionally review, there are options. If you get bored of using flashcards, you can switch to something else. It's really clear that this was designed by people who knew what they were doing. So, if you want to learn a new language, I highly recommend Babble. You can click the link in the description or scan the QR to get 60% off your subscription. And let me know what kind of language, or languages, you want to learn, and why. I'm wearing this hat because I have been relying a lot on hyperfocus lately. I knew that toward the end of this book, I would let myself go into hyperfocus mode, and if I neglect myself a little bit for a month or two, I'll live. And as a result, I'm exhausted. And I forgot things. I forgot the brush that I needed to do my hair. And also my brain was kind of like, you know what, if I'm gonna have to work right now, we're gonna make this fun. So this is the way that I'm able to do what I'm doing right now, which is make a video for the channel. It was the only way that I could get my brain to focus on this. So here we are. Somehow on this channel, I have never actually done a video about hyperfocus, I don't think. And I think one of the reasons for that is it's complicated, and it's a term that those of us who experience hyperfocus know and understand really well, but the research is a little bit interesting there in terms of the terminology that gets used. Anyway, it's a really complicated thing to explain. So I thought I'd talk about what it's like to experience hyperfocus from a first-person perspective, as well as the double-edged sword that is hyperfocus. For a lot of us, it's the one way that we can focus. It's the way that we can get things done. And sometimes it feels like a get out of struggling free card, because whereas focus can sometimes be really difficult, there are times where it's not only effortless, but it's almost not even a choice. This is not only something that we can focus on, it's something that we will be focusing on until we're done, dead, or somebody else snaps us out of it, to the point that we often come out of hyperfocus realizing, oh, we need to pee, we are hungry, it is dark outside. And there's something really wonderful about that for people who get distracted constantly, because it means we get a lot done in a really short amount of time. But it's a double-edged sword, because when you come out of hyperfocus, you realize you really have been neglecting your needs, and also you're freaking exhausted. There were days when I sat and wrote for 8 hours, 12 hours straight, and that comes at a cost. You know, I got a lot done, I got a lot written, but a lot of the time the next day, I couldn't do anything. And the day after that, maybe I could get stuff done, but I was really cranky. It's not just that hyperfocus comes at a cost, it's that the things that we do while we're in hyperfocus aren't always as productive as they feel like they are at the time. And it's hard at work, because we are known for being these, rock stars. I was trying to do quotes, a little hard in this hat, but we're known for being like these rock stars who can accomplish so much and knock so much out at the last minute in a crisis, in certain situations. There's a reason we can't do that all the time, because not only are we exhausted from hyperfocusing yesterday, but hyperfocus comes from the same place that our inattention does. It's difficulty regulating our attention. This is part of having ADHD. And sometimes we can't stop focusing on something, even if we want to, even if we realize this is not actually a helpful thing to be focusing on right now, and we have trouble pulling ourselves away. I've experienced the kind of hyperfocus that feels amazing, and I can't believe how much I got done, and I feel on top of the world, and I would not trade my brain for anything because this is super cool. And I've also experienced the kind of hyperfocus where I am stuck on something that I know is not even helpful. I'm rewriting a section of a chapter or even a sentence, and I'm doing it over and over and over again, and I know I need to move on, and I can't. I've also experienced having to stop hyper-focusing for the evening because I know that if I don't, I'm going to be pretty useless the next day, and there are other things that I need to do the next day. So having to kind of put guardrails in place, and I guess that's one of the things that I have learned to do. I've learned to make space for that kind of deep focus and make sure that there are days and times where I don't have to worry about time, where I can forget about time, where I can just go. I've learned when I can schedule things, when I can't schedule things, so that I don't neglect my needs quite as much. So I can get into a deep flow. I can do as much as I want, but I stop for lunch every day at 1 p.m. and then I go have lunch for an hour and then I come back. And sometimes that's really good because while I maybe could have kept working, at some point there is diminishing returns. If my brain is running out of fuel, it's probably not going to be working as well at a certain point. And sometimes stepping away, I can come back and realize that, okay, maybe this part that I was working on, I don't need to be working on quite so much. Maybe I can move on. So it's one of the things that's been really helpful for me is recognizing when hyperfocus can be helpful, what it costs me, how to protect my time so that I can hyperfocus, but also to recognize that like there are times when it's more likely to happen. And there are times when I want to guard against it happening too much because I will neglect everything else in my life. Hyperfocus has cost me things that I really care about in the past. I have hyperfocused right past a time that I was supposed to hang out with a friend, and I've lost friendships that way. I've hyperfocused, to the point where I am not really paying attention to what I'm eating or how I'm eating, and then I either eat junk or when I'm done, I'm so hungry I put whatever in my mouth. It sucks to say this, but like there are times I come out of a hyperfocus session, I guess, and realize like my dog needs me. So I've had to learn not to rely on hyperfocus and to find other ways to get what I want to get done. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I used to not have other tools. Like I had medication and I hyperfocus, and that was it. Like I didn't know what else to do. And so it cost me quite a lot. It's great to have this, but it's also nice to not have to rely on it. As I've gotten older, projects have gotten more complex and longer. I can't hyperfocus and knock out a book real quick. That's not a thing. I had to learn how to work in marathons, not in sprints. I did a video on long-term projects here that you can check out. Really what it comes down to is I value my ability to hyperfocus, and I value the fact that I have other options now. And I have a lot of them. I have an option to, when I'm done writing for that day and I want to go have dinner with my boyfriend, or I want to go take my dog for a walk, I can leave myself breadcrumbs. I can say, hey, this is what I was doing. This is what I would have done if I'd kept going. And that can make it easier for me to pick it back up tomorrow when I'm rested and I have the energy to keep going. I have the ability to plan my day according to when my medication's going to kick in so that I can focus without having to rely completely on hyperfocus. I've learned to have other people kind of let me know when it's time to move on, put those outside supports in place. So when I was working on this book, a lot of times my editor would be the one to tell me, hey, I know that you want to keep going on this chapter. You've done enough. It's time to move on. And here's the thing, as lovely as it would be if we would only hyper-focus on the things that we need to get done, that's not the only thing we hyper-focus on. Let's be real. We also hyper-focus on a new relationship. And sometimes that can be really intense. That can scare people off. Sometimes it's a letdown too, because if we are able to give that much time and energy and absolute focus on them at the beginning, and then we end up hyper-focusing on something else a month down the road, 2 months down the road, now they're like, where did all that attention go? It's hard. One of the things that made me realize I couldn't rely completely on hyperfocus was early in the channel, it was easy for me to slip into hyperfocus on these topics because they were new to me. They were interesting. They were personally interesting. They were engaging, and I was excited to learn. But at some point, my brain was not being hijacked by cool new topics and helping me be productive. My brain was spinning and trying to hyperfocus on things that had nothing to do with what I wanted to get done that day. And that that was a problem, because at that point I didn't really know how else to get stuff done other than like, my brain's really excited about this cool new shiny thing, let's go. So I had to learn how to switch focus, how to get my brain to focus on something that isn't the thing that it wanted to focus on. And it is possible when you have ADHD. I think that hyperfocus can become a bit of a crutch, I guess. Like, it's the only way we can focus. It's the only way that we know how. And so it's easy to just kind of rely on that. But there are other ways to make things more urgent or exciting or new or novel. One of the things that I learned to do is to be careful what I get my brain spinning on, because I know that that's how it works for me. I'm curious, let me know in the comments how hyperfocus works for you, but usually it's my brain gets spinning on something and then it's just gone. So if I'm really interested in something that's going on in my life, like a new friend or some drama that's happening, I know not to open up that text message. I know not to start that conversation. I know not to get my brain spinning on that thing before I need to work, because now that's what I'm going to be doing for the next 3 hours. I've learned to do the things that get my brain spinning on what I want it to be focused on. And if that's whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish, like, that's what I do. I open up that document and starting to read, just opening up a document and starting to read what I wrote last time will help me like switch my brain over sometimes. I also have to recognize that sometimes, like, I really can't pull myself away and I'm not going to be able to get that much done that day. I was talking to somebody who used to be a leader at Microsoft, and she was talking about how, like, they set up their environment to allow for hyperfocus because they recognized, like, that's how their employees worked. And I think that's really cool. I think it would be really amazing if workplaces understood that that is one way that we get a lot done, and to set up environments to be kind of distraction free so that we have the opportunity to slip into that. I also wish that people understood that when we are hyper focused, we are going to miss what you say. I feel like I saw a comic at one point, but it's almost like having your brain like plugged into something, and unplugging it takes a little bit of time. There's like these brain tendrils that go into this thing that we're like super focused on. And if you yank it out too fast, like it hurts, it's uncomfortable, it's a really horrible experience actually. And a lot of times we get angry at whoever ripped us out, not only because like we were plugged in and we just got that, our attention ripped out, but also because if this is the only way we knew how to focus and somebody just yanked our attention out to ask us what we want for dinner next Thursday, it's really frustrating, right? Like, it took us so long to like get into this place where we could work on the thing we're trying to work on. Like, we don't want to be ripped out of that. I wish that the world understood that hyperfocus is one way that people with ADHD focus, and understood that it doesn't mean we don't have ADHD. It really does come from the same place as our inattention. It's difficulty regulating our attention. Sometimes we can't focus at all. We get distracted by everything. And sometimes we can't pull our attention away. For some reason, right now, I'm organizing my sock drawer, and that's the most important thing in the world, even though I know that there's other things I need to get to. This is what I'm doing, and this is just what I'm going to be doing until I'm done. It's not always a choice. It's not always what we want to be working on. It's not always what we should be working on. And even when it feels like it's what we want to be working on, sometimes when we finally get out of hyperfocus and step back and look at what we've done, it's like, okay, cool. Like, but did I need to write a treatise on trees? So I guess I'll leave you with that. Like, do what you need to do to account for hyperfocus in your life, to set yourself up so that you can, and that's an option for you, but also put guardrails in place, and then know that you're going to need to do some interesting tricks to get yourself to do anything else because you're that exhausted. Thank you to my brain advocates and all my Patreon brains for supporting content so that we can talk about the stuff that we're dealing with. And yeah, I'm so tired, you guys. Just thank you. Thank you so much for making sure that I have this reliable income to rely on so that I can go into hyperfocus and focus on my book and not worry how we're going to pay the bills. Like, subscribe, click all the things, and I will see you next video. Let me know your experience with hyperfocus. I would love to hear it. Bye, brains. Thank you again to Babble for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description or scan the QR to get 60% off your subscription.